Why is the 1 hour dress so famous and so popular? It's not just because it's fast to sew. So many different versions that you can make and no end of ways to vary this dress. The thing that I like about it most of all, more even than the speed with which it can be created, is that it's like a blank canvas for decoration. And if you think of 1920s dresses, it's not the shape that makes us love them, that rather tubular shape. It's the fabrics and the decorations. Fabrics in gorgeous glowing colours, drapey silk velvets, beautiful chiffons, and the trimmings, the beadwork, the appliques, and that is what we really love about 1920s dresses. And they are awesomely expensive to buy originals now. These dresses are 100 years old after all. But the 1 hour dress pattern, which is a system of dress cutting that dates back to a Women's Institute article of that era, allows us to sew our own 1920s dresses really rather easily. And once you have your basic pattern and you understand the basic principles, which is really easy, there's no end of different versions that you can create. So I've got this beautiful deco green silk velvet. I bought 2 meters of it, which proved to be enough for the basic 1920s 1 hour dress, but not quite enough for my purposes. So I had to whiz up and get another ½ meter, and 2.5 meters is going to be perfect with the flouncy sleeves I'm going to add. And I thought I might use details. These are 1920s silk appliques, and I don't know how I'll use them yet. I won't really know till I pin them on. And then look what I found in my stash. It's a 1920s half belt, and I can see that going around the back of the dress and looking rather splendid. So here is my 1 hour dress pattern laid out. So I folded the fabric lengthways, right sides together, and extended the skirt. And as you can see, I don't have enough fabric widthways for the skirt. This has proved a problem. I'm going to have to piece, because although I went and bought another ½ meter of this fabric, I realised that lengthways, my ½ meter only reaches up to here. So I'm going to need to piece that part. I have cut out the sleeves, and then what I'm going to do is, when I cut this out, I'm going to cut the dress in 2 pieces, which is one way to make the 1920s 1 hour dress. You do it that way if you want to make a fuller skirt. I could have made that even wider and gathered it into a full skirt. So I'm going to do some shirring and just have extra each side at the hip. So the main measurement for the dress is the bust measurement, and I allowed a little extra for ease. And then it's basically tube from the shoulders down to the hem. So the important measurements you need are the bust measurement for the width, then you measure from your shoulder down to your waist. In regard to where to put your drop waist measurement, I consulted this original source, which is a Women's Institute guide, and it says if you're short to measure to your natural waistline, and then 2 inches below, if you're short, is where to put your drop waist. If you're medium height, it should be 3 inches below your natural waistline, and if you're tall, 4 inches below your natural waistline. So I'm 5'3", relatively short, so I went ahead and measured my drop waistline to 2 inches below. And then I remembered that in the 1940s the average height was 5'2", so I didn't know what it was in the 1920s, but actually I should have measured 3 inches below. Hopefully it'll be okay. I think the main thing with this pattern actually is to keep just holding it up to yourself. Don't stress too much about getting your measurements absolutely right from the outset. Obviously err on the side is a little bit more than you need, and then I would say just hold the pattern up against you. It's a very simple basic shape that you can just adjust and mark on yourself. This is the top of my shoulders, and I've measured down to my drop waist here, which is 2 inches below my natural waist, and I'm going to cut the skirt part off here and do some shirring on each side here to bring the width of the skirt to the width of the bodice, and then stitch that back on. Normally the dress pattern for the 1920s 1 hour dress would have sleeves extending out the side here, but I'm putting on my own sleeves. For the neckline, you can just have it straight across, and because it's a drapey fabric, it would just fall. So I'm probably going to cut a little bit more neckline. Once I've got the dress on me, I'm just going to pin the neckline that I want. And of course the main thing is just to leave enough space for your head to go through.
And I spent a lot of time doing this, checking that the pile of the velvet was all lying down smooth in the same direction.
Your first go at this pattern will not take an hour because you need to do all your measurements and work out the pattern. But once you've got it, you'll want to experiment with all kinds of 20s dresses.
And then it was time to sew up the few seams that there are. So it all would have been smooth sailing had I not given myself the task of those rather complicated sleeves, which actually I should have to do in my Halloween pumpkin dress. And the shirring, but shirring is one of those things that looks, I think, rather complex, but it's really easy peasy, but it does take rather a long time. That's my shirring. So I did 15 rows on each side, and all you do is wind some shirring elastic around the bobbin. You have to do that by hand, and there it is, and then you just sew as you would, and you allow half as much extra fabric because it's going to squash down. Totally dusty, the back of my machine, isn't it? It's very clean at the front, I promise. And here's my dress, and what I chose to do with the appliques is just to use 2 of the silk flower appliques asymmetrically, one at my shoulder and the other at the hem of the dress. And you can see how my Art Deco sleeves just slide to and fro up my arm. They are quite a thing to make, these sleeves, but they are actually my favourite sleeves. And just a little close-up of those violet applique and of the beaded half belt that I sewed to the back of the dress. And what I like about this dress is it's so comfortable. Its glamour comes from the silk velvet of the fabric and the details that I've stitched onto it. Although some people did still wear corsets or girdles during this era, there were of course corset check-ins for those young flappers to hand in the corsets their mothers had made them wear so that they could dance freely. And you can just see the little shirring at my hip level. But of course you can just have a 1 hour dress as a tunic and perhaps tie a sash around at hip level. If you made the 1 hour dress in 2 parts like I did, it was traditional to hide the join with a sash or some kind of belt. If you decide that you would like to make a 1 hour dress, I did investigate all the different instructions from the original instructions in the Women's Institute to the patterns on offer on sites like Etsy, but the best instructions, in my opinion, by far came from the Closet Historian, both her video and her blog. A quick quote from the Women's Institute: "A smart, up-to-the-minute dress, cut out, completely made, all ready to put on within an hour!" Exclamation mark. Well, I reckon this dress took me 10 hours, perhaps. It's a conservative estimate. Though actually it could be made within an hour. If you'd done the pattern already, if you didn't put on fancy sleeves and didn't do 15 lines of shirring on each hip, there would be a possibility. But I'm glad I have my sleeves. I like to have long sleeves because I think, well, if it's chilly, then there's all sorts that you could, I mean thermals, that you could discreetly wear under this dress so that you'd look glamorous on the outside but be nice and snug within. And it's one of the reasons actually I kept that neckline quite high. I just kept it as a slash neckline, just turning it under twice and hand stitching it down. And actually a friend of mine was saying that she wears silk velvet in the daytime, and she was like, well, why not? I can wear it any time I like. And I thought, well, I like that attitude because I love silk velvet, and I don't go out very much in the evening, sadly. Well, they want to. Anyway, it's such a comfortable dress with one's waistline completely obscured. Waistlines just weren't important at all in the 20s, which is quite nice, isn't it, really? Go out, enjoy a good meal, and it would all be kind of nicely hidden, like one's thermals. So much to recommend these dresses.